Welcome to the Devon Corner, where we discuss the world's most practical breed of cattle and the role they play in different production systems around the globe. Everything from genetics and pedigrees to cattle and pasture management. My guest today is my co-host, Steve Montgomery from Lamppost Farm. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Jeremy. Good morning. We're excited to do this podcast and invite tons of people in that are passionate about these animals and the beauty they create and the good quality food they make and the joy they are to host. So thanks for inviting me along.
Absolutely. Well, let's tell folks a little bit about how this evolved, right? We started a project, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. AJ O'Neill, our current president, was doing webinars. And tell us, you described the webinar and how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, the webinars were an opportunity for us to invite guests in to add educational value to the membership of the association, but also for us to just um, capitalize on an opportunity to have good conversations. And so we did webinars from ear tagging and DNA sample collection to financials with Dave Pratt from Ranching for Profit to um, how to doctor your newborn calves with Darren Jones. I mean, those were great, super webinars. And then we moved to film some content with your dad, Jerry, and Vic Edwards, and just a conversation around genetics, some of the old genetics. So those conversations really took off, and they were a fun time to have sitting behind a computer screen and talking to one another, and nice to bank all that information. So we're excited about doing this now.
Absolutely. Me and Laurel were talking in the truck earlier, and there's nothing else out there about Devons in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s like that. And my father today couldn't pull that information out. And so it's wonderful that we've recaptured it. All those webinars that you talked about are available on the Red Devon USA website. Um, and there's a library. So definitely encourage people to do that. But as Steve said, we did this series and um, we haven't released a lot of the video yet because we went for hours some mornings, and Steve had to sometimes build the Prezi presentation while we did it, which contained pictures of the breeders and the significant animals in the U.S. and globally. Maybe we can link a few clips or something to the podcast after. Uh, but it was a great time, and that's where we got to where we're going. We've noticed at conferences and things around the country and around the world, we have these in-depth conversations with breeders about everything. Um, and people said, man, we should video that. We should share that. There was a great conversation on the board of directors meeting last week that Heidi Leitzel had brought up. And you go, man, too bad we can't video and share these things um, because they give people an opportunity to learn, and hopefully we can create a situation where viewers, listeners can send questions to us as well that the podcast might
Yeah,
bring up,
unearthed,
bring
right.
form. So
Yeah, I
yes,
mean, so
go
many
ahead.
of those informal conversations have led to incredible transformation for me personally. So I'm really thankful for the chance to put those together here and then to pick the brains of so many others. The conversation about genetic testing and what that'll tell us and how we utilize that, not to just kind of fall in line with our breeding techniques, but also like how it informs us and gives us eyes to see differently, to become better stewards. I'm excited about the opportunities here.
Me too. And I think also we're at a time in the Devon world where we can have these conversations.
Yeah,
If
right.
we go back 10 and 20 years, I don't want to say that the breed was divided, but breeders were divided, and you couldn't say this bull threw big calves or carried too much hair. It was people were offended, and people were, is it personal or is it the cattle? And it was a tough time. But now we can have very open conversations about animals, and there's shortcomings in every genetic line. There's things hiding a bad udder gene, a bad foot gene. Hopefully we're talking 20 generations ago, so the chances of it coming up are less. But I think we can have, breeders are still trying to sell and promote their own cattle. But I think the organization and the meetings that we've had some incredibly open conversations. You want to elaborate on that at all, or?
Well, I mean, I got brought into Red Devon USA, which was actually the ADCA before that. From my side, is how the way I got in through a relationship with Bud and Nancy Chonko, which are just fantastic people that put their arm around me and kind of led me in. And that was indicative of kind of the journey and the fruit that's come downstream since then. I mean, the relationships that we have, you and me and AJ and David and Darren Jones, and I mean, just keep on going. Anne, and the laughs that are shared, and the conversations that have been had, whether it's in a van traveling around or um, at one another's farms. I mean, those are invaluable. And so my hope is that this podcast communicates both the qualities of the cattle, which I think it will very much, and the qualities of the community that surround it. In many ways, I've been thinking like maybe we should have called this like it's about our pedigree, because you're sitting there as a multi-generational farmer talking about conversations with Laurel about a video we had with your dad. Like that, what a gift. The opportunity to have multi-generations sit in line. And then the people that we've connected with along the way. This podcast should really highlight and will highlight all of that. From new people that are just kind of looking in on that to people that have been in it for a long time. I think it's hugely beneficial.
We won't talk about the people that were culled from the herd.
That's true. Because they had bad udders or uneven
We'll,
testicles or anything like
we'll
that.
stay away. We'll stay away from that. Well, I want to back you up. Tell me. I know the story, but it's such a good story. Tell me how Bud and Nancy Chonko put their arm around you and brought you into the Devon community.
Yeah, it was I mean, it came out of left field. So I lived in proximity to the Chonkos as I was growing up in central Pennsylvania. We were neighboring school districts. We played against my football team, played against Bud's son's football team, and Bud was a coach on the sidelines. And so we knew of each other, played against each other. And then when I went to college, Bud's son, Joseph, went to the same school and ended up living right across the hall from me. And so we became really good friends, spent a lot of time working together, worked at the same summer camp, and then graduated college and kind of went our separate ways. We knew of each other, what was going on, but then Joseph passed away tragically in 2001 from a heart issue. And then the next year, my dad passed away. And so Joseph had been buried in a wooden casket that was made by an Amishman. And when my dad passed away, the funeral home was in the same town that Bud and Nancy live in. And so we were at the funeral home and thought, what if we could, put my dad in the same wooden casket or similar wooden casket built by the same guy? So we called Bud and Nancy. Anyway, long story short, that was in 2002. And then fast forward 7 years, and now I'm here in Ohio farming. I'm looking for cattle. And back then it was really hard to find Devon cattle for me anyway. I just had heard that the numbers were really low. And so I was frustrated one day, just kind of asking the Lord, like, hey, what is this? Like, what are you asking us to do here? I want these Devon cattle. I don't know what to do. And so I was actually working digging a ditch on the tractor, and I just was like, I'm going to take a break, go in for lunch. And I got on the computer and I went onto the ADCA website, and right on the homepage was a bull named Keystone Barnabas. And I was like, oh, that's in Pennsylvania. Where's this guy at? Like, where? So I started scrolling down, and it was an ad for the sale of this bull, which coincidentally had already been sold like 2 years prior, but the picture was still up on the website. And so I scrolled down in the information, and at the bottom it said owned by Bud and Nancy Chonko. And so I called them up out of the blue, and I was like, hey, I don't know. I didn't know the bull was sold at this point, but I was like, hey, I'm interested in your bull, but probably more than anything, I might be interested in a mentor because I really don't know which direction I'm heading and how to make it work. And that was an answer on their answering machine. Bud called me back about a half hour later, and we talked for a long time, which is common with Bud. We talk forever anyway. But anyway, he said, "Hey, give me about a half hour. I'll call you back." So after that conversation hung up, he called me back and he said, "Nancy and I have a new line that we're starting, and we want to give you the first fruit of that line. So whatever calf comes out of this cow is yours when it hits the ground." And that was the start of our Devon herd here at Lamppost Farm. That was a bull named Glen Storm, which was a P60, I think P60 on both sides of the pedigree. Ended up being a nice bull, but the relationship with Bud and Nancy took off from there, and he became a father figure for me, and I became kind of a second son for him, and we were just together this past weekend again, and we love each other, see each other, and most of my cattle here, well, I wouldn't say most, I would say a significant amount of our cattle here come downstream from Bud's stewardship. And I tell people all the time, if somebody says to me when I'm in my 70s or 80s, hey, you remind me of Bud Chonko, I'll think that was success. That's a kind of a home run target, if they even know who he is at that point. So anyway,
I would gladly take that compliment as well. He's a great guy.
yeah.
I just remember every time he came down, they wouldn't pick a cow and load it and leave. They would unpack a picnic, whether it was him and Nancy or his daughter or whoever was with him, and they'd spend all day, and uh, just fantastic. It was great. Bud joined us on the Congress for dinner. So it was very, very brief, but always great to see him. Always great to see him. Um, you talked about riding in the van, and I just mentioned the Congress and um, what is the World Devon Congress? What did we just celebrate?
Well, that this one was really special because it was merged with 400 years of Devon cattle in North America. But the World Devon Congress is every 4 years. There's a group of people from around the world that kind of land in a specific country that, whether it's Brazil or Australia or New Zealand or Great Britain or here in the States, just to celebrate and investigate what's going on in the Devon community around the world. And it was abundantly obvious how friendships crossed country borders and were consistent through the Devon community. I mean, it was really fun to get to know people, to hear their perspective on cattle, their perspective on our cattle, but also get to know them. I mean, when the night before the event we hosted here at the farm, so it traveled around the country this time, and there were host farms, and we hosted on a Sunday, so Saturday night we all got together and just sat on my back porch and ate wings. Some of the guys in the group, which was such a sweet night, and laughed about things that they discovered about one another and other people, and talked about what life was like, mostly in Australia with those guys, and but then shared space with AJ and Gail O'Neill. They were the traveling chefs along the way, and so yeah, just it was a real sweet blend of both visiting with people and also learning about these cattle. And um, I got to participate in a few stops and really enjoyed that. And some of the fun stuff was with you up in Plymouth.
Yeah, well, yeah, the World Devon Congress, everything Steve just said, it's rewarding for me because I went in 1984 to my first Congress. So I grew up attending and having all the rewarding things that you just mentioned, and for 30 years have been saying, you guys got to participate in this. It's worth it. It's so rewarding. And now I have 20 or 30 fellow countrymen and women that have experienced it. So it's great. And the next Congress is slotted for Australia in 2028, and we'll look forward to information coming out on that. Of course, it'll be on the Red Devon USA website. You can also go to devoncattle.com, which is the Australian website and kind of the international website. So a lot of great information at both. So yeah, this year was special. 400 years. I pushed hard, as you know, to promote this as the birth of the U.S. beef and dairy industry. Devon cattle were the first cattle brought over. They were also the first packed beef in the country, and they were the first milk cows brought to the country. So a lot to celebrate, and we on other episodes might get into the history of Devon going back, but um, you and me got to experience something pretty special up at Plymouth Plantation. Uh, we're going to be straight shooters on this podcast, and I'm going to tell you right now, Plymouth Plantation was a nightmare to work with. Uh, they worked against us on this thing, but it was the ideal situation. On the screen, you see me and Steve at dark 30. The sun had just come up. That is the Atlantic Ocean. We are in Plymouth, Mass, in the Living History Museum, where we brought the Devon cattle up the road from the shore. And um, Steve's going to play a video. We're going to link that video so those that are listening and can't see it, you can pull it up when you're safely parked somewhere. But I'll shut up and let you guys watch here.
Man, that was that's worth playing again because to me this this was like being on holy ground. I mean, we just really enjoy like the opportunity to be in that space. They don't turn the keys over to that space at all. And so to be able to put these, six animals up the road through the village, what a gift. I mean, we sat there, it was just about the perfect morning. The sunlight, I mean, everything was just about, it was so right. And they came right up the hill and ran those cattle a few times up the road and got good video of that. But it felt like we were looking in on something. We were like trespassing hard. And so
Well, I
that
think
was
part of it was you and I were both running on like 4 hours total sleep the last 3 days, trying to get everything set. And you're driving here and there and everywhere. And uh, I remember we agreed we'd meet out there at 5:30 or whatever it was the next morning. And I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Steve's definitely not gonna make it. And there we both were, cup of coffee, and it was awesome, and it was just us, right? And that's what was so cool. Now later in the day, we did it with the entire organization. We had Plymouth Plantation staff and people there, and we struggled a little bit. They didn't clear the site for us like they had hoped. What was really exciting was Rick and Laura Bowman of Backyard Green Films. Um, will you talk a little bit about the role they played um, in the 400-year celebration, but also the Plymouth to Plymouth movie? And they ran the World Devon Congress on the ground as much or more than I did in terms of driving buses and organizing details. But
Yeah, they were amazing. I mean, this is Alara in the background, just over my head, hiding behind the post of the fort. Um, the reason we ran them up in the morning was to try to get unique, different kinds of footage, and we ran them through the village a few times just so that Rick could really capitalize on the opportunities where nobody was around. And then in the afternoon, it was all period gear. Like Mark Winslow, as he's running the cattle in that video, is he's just dressed in his normal clothing, but in the afternoon he had a hat on and all kind of like a smock and different things like that. It was fun to have other people around, kind of peering over the fences, looking at the cattle as they came in, and maybe as it would have been, who knows? I mean, that was that was pretty cool. But Rick and Alara in their role, they were incredibly generous. They came early in the year prior to this event, which happened in the beginning of May. They were here at my farm in, I think it was in December. They had gone to AJ's and they went to Van Kirk's, went to your place, just to interview a bunch of us, just about what Devons have been in our uh, agricultural engagement, how we are part of a community of people, and with the goal of shooting this or putting together a film called Plymouth to Plymouth. So Plymouth, England, where the Pilgrims would have left and brought those cattle from, to Plymouth, Massachusetts, where they landed and pushed them off the boat and swam them on shore and then walked them up through the town like this. So Rick and Alara were great. I mean, Alara has such a gift of being able to ask questions and really draw out the story. And then Rick is so patient and soft spoken in many ways. It was fun to peel away with him and sit at a brewery right on the coast of Massachusetts and talk about life and just get to know him a bit too. So, um, hey, there you go. There's the picture. Let me get out of this so you can really see that.
that's the Devons coming ashore. Any art buffs out there that can tell us who painted this? We've done tons of research and haven't been able to find it out. But the Devons coming ashore at Plymouth, one of our prized possessions here. I don't have quite the AV skills Steve does. I just got to pull out a photo and hold it. But there are some better pictures of that floating around too. And we will also link Backyard Green Films. Um, Rick and Alara do so much, not just for the Devon community, but for the ag community. They're at sheep and wool festivals and draft horse festivals, and it goes on and on. I don't know. I don't know why they own a home, because I think they travel 360 days a year and are filming something and living in a bus and uh, smiling and enjoying it the whole way. So yeah, a shout out to them. We should also shout out to all the hosts that you know made the World Devon Congress happen, and the sponsors. And Steve talked about the night before he hosted an event, but Steve's day was what would I call it? A wasn't a chapel service, but it was an open air service that brought tears to my eyes. I saw AJ crying, then I looked over. Oh, Melanie was crying first, then AJ started crying, and I said, "Man, this is going to be. We don't look like a bunch of tough cowboys." It was a
Don't
very
make it sound
moving.
like you were downstream. Mel said she started because you were over there crying.
uh, Maybe I don't remember the order. I was so moved. It really was. And that's why Steve's my first guest. Steve is just easy to be with, and the service you and your family. I think your brother wrote it.
Yeah.
Um, I asked for a copy of it. It was just so moving. And first time Steve became president, I'm in a room at Mark Reed's, and there's like 80 people, and we're drawing names out of a hat. And I got to go meet some 22-year-old lady that's from Wisconsin and teaches school, and her husband bought some cows, and now they're, and I only know all this because Steve made me go interview her and introduce her. And I've always shied away from those sort of things, but Steve has a way of forcing interaction, but keeping it very fun and positive and keeping people motivated. He was president of our organization and did a great job just bringing people together. And that speaks kind of to the mission of Lamppost Farm. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Lamppost and the operation there?
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. I mean, that your words are, you're generous in your words. So let me put it that way. So I'm thankful for that. I we had the I mean, when the calendar came out for the Devon Congress and our day was going to be on a Sunday and it was late in the journey, like one of the, Sunday being traditionally in the Christian tradition, a day of rest, made the most sense that we would just do a low key day, like less about a push, less about a information exchange, and more about just being together. Um, and then we at Lamppost our mission is to reach and teach people through agriculture. My background is my wife and I both did campus ministry for 15 years and using experiences in the wilderness, actually, because I used to take college students on backpacking trips and kayaking trips and winter camping to teach them, to open the world to them. And then when we started Lamppost, the idea was to use agriculture in the same way, that there's so much that happens on a farm that tells us who we are, that God created us. But I mean, the first part of scripture is he created humans and put them in a garden to do agriculture. And that's not a gee whiz kind of idea. I think it was intentional because agriculture is designed to be relational. And so being able to come up close and personal with who we are into that process is really um, what our mission at Lamppost is and has been, and why we chose to do a worship service on a Sunday for as part of this Congress. And the cool thing is we had just read a book, my brother and I, called Work and Worship, and it talked about bringing your whole self to that space. Like it says, in Scripture, we bring trumpets, we bring tears, so things we're thankful for, things we're sad about in the world, ashes, things we've contributed to when it comes to our sin and brokenness, petitions, the things we cry out to God for, and then the fruit, the byproduct of our work, all should be brought into the space of worship and offered as what we bring. So not that God's judging, oh, that's not good enough, or don't do it this way, but like bring yourself to it. And so it was cool to ask questions at that worship service, like, what are the things you love most about farming, to farmers from all around the world, and just to have people have a chance to share those stories. And then what are the things that really break your heart about the world that you work in and wish that you could do differently? And whether that's relationships with one another or relationships with landowners or government entities or whatever. And so the chance to share that with one another was really I mean, it was awesome. And then we bring it back together with communion at the end, because Jesus is the redeemer of all things. So from the things we're thankful for to the things we produce in fruit and anything in between, he asks us to bring it, and he he receives it. And when we come like that, and that's the invitation we have, then man, what can happen? We can be set free, and that's what happened. I think that Sunday, it just when I think back about it and the songs we sang together, um, and in the trees around the farm here, and Ann DeRusi came to me afterwards, and she said, "This is your chapel," and like looking up, like it was like the trees were towering over us with the sun flowing in. It was, I mean, I couldn't have scripted it better. I was really thankful for that. And then you did a fantastic evaluation of some of my cattle and just taught people left and right that weekend. And then dinner with AJ, and everything he produced was spot on.
It always is. It always is. And you're right. The therapeutic benefits of getting your hands in the soil or on animals um, with people, but especially with, we do a lot of work with veterans here with PTSD, and we rent a farm called Windy Ridge Farm. That's a Mustang farm. They have autistic kids come in. They had a kid come in that had never spoke and spent, I don't remember, 5, 10 minutes with his horse, and all of a sudden he starts speaking. And it's
No kidding.
like how do you deny the power? And um, that's a great lead into why you have Devon cattle. How do Devon cattle fit into that desire to have your hands on and work closely with the animals in the land?
That I mean, that is a great lead in. I mean, our design of the farm is for people to be able to draw up close and personal with one another and with the creation around them. So I wanted people to be able to get close without being in harm. So my first kind of rubrics for choosing animals was docility, but then also wanted a byproduct that was 100% grass fed and highest quality we could feed people so that they didn't have to just compromise on taste, on flavor, but they could eat the best steaks, the best roasts, the best burgers they've ever had, and that was as healthy for them as anything they could possibly want. And that all came together in Devon cattle. I mean, like, and now that I have them and I work them and we spend time with them, I'm I'm blown away all the time by the docility, being able to be around such a magnificent animal. Um, but they look at you like they're partners, not enemies. They don't want to turn and push you away or run you over. They want to just work alongside of you, and and that's been the case for me. And so I feel the freedom to invite people into that relationship because of the quality of these animals. And it's, I mean, some people have made comments that, yeah, if you handled them every day, they would all be like that. Not from the drop, and definitely not whenever we change the scenario on them, but they still work well even in those situations. Like when they're fresh to our space, when we change up the way we're handling them, or we're doing something new with a bunch of people in the field, they still look like they want to work alongside of us, not work against us. And that, um, yeah, that's why I chose to go the route of the Devons, and I'm thankful because I've never had to look back.
Well, for over 400 years, right, they've been selected for docility. They didn't put something on the ship Charity in 1623 that was high-headed. And it's a combination though of genetics, but also management, and having uh, consulted and judged your herd at least 3 times. I always have to make cows stand up. They just lay there as you walk up to them, and you don't handle them every day. You're out among them a lot, but you handle them easy. You select properly. You cull the ones that aren't, and it shows. And with a big number of customers being homesteaders and people with small herds, small acreage, their family working close to the cattle that are held in with a single strand polywire. Uh, I don't know what other breed you could do it with and still get that gourmet quality. beef.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, it's hard to describe the gourmet quality, but we're hitting home runs all the time on that. I mean, it's shocking every bite for me whenever it comes out of the crock pot or off the grill, just to have that kind of like, oh my goodness, this has to be the best one I've ever had, because it's better. I can't remember it being any better, but that's the case every time. Like, maybe it's just I'm learning how to cook too, but you know.
No, it's more than that. And you and I are going to interview AJ O'Neill on Thursday,
Mm.
who is a butcher. He's also our president now of Red Devon USA, but he's originally a butcher slash meat cutter that had grass-fed beef coming through him and his father's shop, and kind of rolled their eyes, and all of a sudden they had one or two producers starting to bring in these really nice grass-fed carcasses, and they did some homework and research and found that they were Devon cattle. And such was the birth of them into the Devon business. And we'll hear a lot more, and we'll focus on meat quality on that Thursday interview. So hopefully those that join us. AJ's also a friend and a easy interview, much like Steve. So we're starting with the wheels really greased and easy conversations. Um, so if you had to do this all over again, and I send every person that's agreed to be on our podcast, we're going to send them a list of questions, kind of a guide of where we're going to go. But one question is, what would you do differently? And after the Bud Chonko story, it sounds like we wouldn't change a thing. So let's modify that question. Is what advice would you give to people that are getting started? They call you up out of the blue and they've just inherited 40 acres and want to run some cattle. What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. And both of those questions, whenever you sent the list out, were like, how do I really answer this well? That question about advice, I think I mean, the cattle work for themselves, and they speak for themselves. And I guess maybe on a practical level, I would buy from somebody who has cattle that they're selling that they've had for a long time. So don't necessarily be afraid to get your first animals that are 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and start with them. Get a couple calves, because those are proven in somebody's space, right? That's how I started. Bud sold me some of his older animals. Um, and those animals produced for a long time. I mean, I wish I had a picture up of uh, Bonnie Blue from Pine Top Farm. She was here until she was 16 years old. At 8 years old, she was the postcard picture of a Devon cow. Just a fantastically beautiful animal. Um, so yeah, I would, that, and then she stayed here for another 8 years and gave me calves and along the way, and I have offspring now that populate my herd out of that line. Um, so on a practical level, that's probably what I would say. But expect to lean into more than just animals. Like, that's really where the fruit of this is in the relationships and the learning from one another. If you come with a posture of, I'm here to learn and I want to glean as much as I can, but recognize that will, my questions will fuel the kind of the conversation. And that's the beauty of the events when we're together, but also the opportunity to then, like, down the road. I mean, I didn't get into this to sit here on the board and to be have a herd of Devon cattle in Ohio. I got into it because I wanted good quality beef for my customers, and I wanted people to be able to engage them well. But the fruit of all of that is I'm tied into a community of people that I really value and appreciate. And so And I don't know that's the road for everyone, of course. I mean, people move and life changes, but and people have different priorities. But I would say the opportunity is there to to model in our people relationships what we model in the pasture when it comes to good stewardship and like flourishing for all the animals. And then aside from the culling piece that you talked about.
Well, I think there's a lot of wisdom that can be drawn from that. I mean, you talked about relationships with breeders from around the world. So wherever you move or these things obviously impact your business, but the wisdom I gain from what you say is one, have a mentor, lean on somebody that knows what they're doing. And I don't think that necessarily even has to be a Devon person, but somebody with some cattle experience. If you don't have cattle experience, I would certainly recommend start with stocker cattle before you graduate to cows. Starting with cows, I think, is really wise for every reason you said, but also so you don't have to start with heifers. They've never had a calf, they've never raised a calf. Are they going to milk? A lot of questions are answered with proven animals. Um, but then I see a lot of people that get into it and then they lose themselves on the farm. They stop going to events like you talked about, and all of a sudden I show up one day as a consultant and I'm looking at their 500-pound yearlings, and I'm going, yearlings shouldn't look like this. They need to be fed better. And people sometimes in their grass fed, their desire to be grass fed and natural, aren't giving the animals proper nutrition. And uh, we're 100% grass fed, but I'll throw that out in a minute if it comes to animal welfare and safety. If I need to feed them, I'm gonna feed them. Uh, and then you just have to work it out on the marketing end. But that continued education, right, after you're farming, is harder to do. But don't stop reading books and go and visit other people, listen to podcasts, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, good advice. Good advice. Well, this is a question that everybody's going to get, but I'm eager to hear your answer. Um, when you are dead and gone, what's the legacy that you're going to leave in the agricultural world? What are they going to say about Steve? Is it going to be the herd of cattle, or what he did with the land, or what's the legacy you hope to leave?
Some of the things we're in the works of right now is trying to multiply what we do. And that means I'm going to be pouring into multiple farmers in ways of trying to teach them how to use farming as an education and ministry. Um, I hope, when I'm dead and gone, which who knows when that's going to be, right? I'm past the median age of my family's men, so we're just going to push the throttle down and run to the finish line. But which could be 30 years from now, and I'm hoping that's the case. But is that like the pedigree of the people that I've invested in includes the name Steve Montgomery and Mel Montgomery and our efforts as a family. That includes my kids, who are literally in my pedigree, or I'm in their pedigree, but also just the people that we have opportunities to intersect with. I mean,
The ministry.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I want people to to see life and the opportunities they have, the gifts from the Lord, as what we've been able to enjoy with one another and friendships, and
So, are
also,
you actively seeking farmers to partner with at this point?
yeah. So we at Lamppost have actually made a little bit of a pivot, well, a lot of pivot. So we're primarily in the farm planting business. So churches plant churches. It's called church planting. And the idea of doing a farm planting with the same intent, like teaching people how to, I mean, coming alongside of people that want to use their farm as a community development in their communities. I mean, our big goal, honestly, is to plant a farm in every town in America. Um, the only way we're going to move the needle when it comes to healthy food is to make those relationships so valuable that people want more and more of that. And they get it by buying the food from each of those farmers, but they also get it by connecting and knowing who those people are and becoming part of the family. I mean, just like you, Jeremy, you have customers that become friends. And by design, a farm is meant to engage people at that level, not just transactional, but also and in relationship in some really sweet ways. So you show a legacy of your family reaching far and wide through your farm, and I mean that's by design. We're supposed, like, that's a great picture, and so we want that to be the case with friends, customers, family members. And so, yeah, we are actively seeking other people that are interested.
So if
In
I'm a listener and I'm hearing this and I'm going, hallelujah, this is what I've been looking for. This is what I want to do at Jeremy's farm. What should I do next? How do I reach out to you? How do I find more information?
Well, I mean, you can look on our website, which now we have two websites. One is lampostfarm.com and one is lampostfarm.org. The .org website will be launched here in the next couple weeks, I hope. We're getting to the point of being able to really capture this. We're still very young in the how process. Some of our goals are land acquisition and the opportunities that come, whether it's from somebody like Bud Chonko who doesn't want to actively farm anymore, kind of coming alongside of somebody who wants to partner with him, or whether it's other farms like here at Lamppost using that space, whether it's land leaseholder relationships, whatever. We want to merge those new farmers with opportunities and then build a network around them to support and encourage them along the way. And so they can get a hold of me. My phone number's on those websites, um, or send me an email. I would gladly talk to people more about that. And
That's
I hope this is something that moves quick and fast. Actually, we see the opportunities right now to do this, as people are hungry for a real relationship. And I haven't found a place other than farming that does it this good. This and that. I mean, that's why we.
well, eh, but I can't overemphasize the ministry, and it's real. And that's why so many people were moved that day. I mean, and I've seen it at Lamppost whenever I've been there, when I'm in the store, when I'm at your home, when I'm uh, doing consultations, talking with your interns. I mean, it just, you can't fake that stuff, right? It's real. And I had a builder one time come give me an estimate, and he had what would Jesus do, and he had the Jesus fish, and he had the cross, and he left my house and he went out, and one of his employees had scratched his truck. Well, he threw a hammer in the woods and started cussing this guy up and down one side. And as he drove away, me and my wife looked at each other and said, I don't know what Jesus would do, but it wasn't that. And we didn't hire the builder. We went a different route. But how you treat people, right? And it's apparent there. So hats off to you and Mel and the rest of your family and staff, because it's awesome. So again, reach out if you're interested. Um, it's again, these questions are leading right into each other. If you weren't farming, what would you be doing?
uh Oh, there are a couple things like my past prior. So we moved to do this farm because my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer and ended up passing away. And we started asking the questions like, what about our food system causes a healthy man to die at age 50, from a cancerous disease, which is tied to food, um, And so that's why we moved here. Felt the real strong call to address that and to speak to that. But I left the career. I loved doing wilderness ministry. I mean, probably about a year or so before making the decision to leave that, I was skiing on 88 inches of snow in the mountains of Wyoming with a backpack and a sled behind me and a group of students. And I thought, I mean, literally, I said to myself while I'm going up the trail, I could do this the rest of my life. And then a year later, I'm learning how to farm, and I put that on the shelf. If I weren't doing this and I could go back, although you know how I am now, like heck, I'm a quarter of the man I once was, right? So
My skiing days are not in the wilderness anymore. I'll just say that.
I might do it from a canoe because that's a little easier,
There you
So
go. There you go. Well, we'll accept that answer, but I would argue that you're still doing wilderness ministry. Um, I guess it's the definition of wilderness that's a little different, but still got your hands in the soil, uh, and that's what I hope for the rest of my life. If I can't run this farm or do something else, I hope I can still have a garden, have a dog, have a something. Um,
have somebody bring you a good steak.
I have somebody bring me a good steak. My kids were raised on pretty good meat. Sometimes it was the old three-legged steer that we couldn't move somewhere else. But I tell you what, get them fat, and it's still a gourmet eating experience.
That's great.
Uh, well, we are to the end of the questions, and the last question we want to ask is we want to turn it back to you. Is there anything you'd like to get into? Um, that was the birth of this podcast, was just these conversations about management. So is there anything you have that we can get into before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, I have two questions actually. I'll ask the first one and then the second one we can wrap up with. But my first question is like I sent you this bull, Bruce. He came from John Lindley's farm, HTFD1 is his name. Fantastic bull. I'm thrilled with the calves. I mean, I'm seeing calves in growthiness and that I hadn't seen. Anyway, I got a call from somebody asking about semen from him, and I just want to throw out to you: when do you consider, like, when would you consider collecting a bull? Like, what are the criteria that make you go, yes, let's do that. Let's put him in the tank.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. And yeah, the bull Bruce I saw on the World Devon Congress, another reason to take these tours. And Steve had leased the bull out. Then now we're leasing the bull, and we brought him in and did some blood work. He's been on multiple farms, so for biosecurity here, I did some testing, and he was fine, and so we put him right out to breed. And Bruce is seven,
I
eight
think he's
years
8
old.
years old now.
8 years old. So age is certainly a factor, right? Especially if I have some rare genetics. I use some old semen from the 50s, and I've got this bull, and he's 3, 4, 5 years old, and he looks great. Well, normally I don't want to collect a bull at that point because there's not enough production, right? We don't have enough calves on the ground to say this bull really warrants being collected. And I should even back up, right? Was this bull out of a really good cow with a good udder, good feet? Because if not, shouldn't have even been a bull in the first place. And that uh, genetic defect or conformational defect is too close in the pedigree, and it's going to reoccur too many times. So, and you're not going to see it in the calves. Calves might be growthy as all get out, but what are the daughters' udders going to look like? How many daughters do we have in production? So if it's rare genetics, we might go ahead and collect that bull on a small scale just as a insurance policy. What I would really like to do is get 100 calves on the ground. I got 100 calves on the ground. 50 of those are heifers, 50 are bulls. Probably we're not keeping all the bulls, but I want the sons and the daughters to reach the age of production and show me quality production. They're having a calf, they're fertile, they have good udder, sound feet, um, good locomotion, all the conformational things we're looking for. Then I'm interested in collecting that bull in a big way. Now, I say that most breeders have an average herd size of 10, 15 animals. What's 10 years before they got 100 calves on the ground? So they're at a bit of a disadvantage uh, in that regard, but I would still wait until I saw the production before I collected the bull. So when I look at Bruce, obviously he checks all the boxes, or I wouldn't have brought him here,
Mhm.
right? He's out of a good cow. He's shown good quality production at your place. The pedigree I like. If you look at the pedigree, it's Rotakawa on the top half of the pedigree. The bottom half of the pedigree is some old Effingham Lakota genetics and some Jim and Sandy Brashears genetics, and that makes up your four grandparents. There's nothing there that we don't have elsewhere, right? There's nothing in there that's rare or can't be recreated from a genetic standpoint. So I don't see the urgency on that side, but I also see that the bull has had quality production. Um, so if it's me, if I'm the owner of the bull, I want to see daughters. I want to see at least 10 daughters in production before I'm going to spend the money to collect the bull. We've collected a lot of bulls, and I would say half of those bulls I've ended up throwing the semen away or throwing most of the semen away. I don't need it, it's incredibly expensive to store 500 straws of semen month after month after month. And if I'm only putting in 3 or 4 straws a year and I'm not selling any, why do I have 500? So in a case like that, I'm probably throwing 400 away, or I'm giving them to a commercial cattleman that's been a good customer. When I bought Preston Carlton semen inventory, I took and sent 10 straws of 6 different bulls to commercial cattlemen at $8 a straw to cover the cost. And the only caveat was they give me feedback on which bulls really produced. Several of those producers gave me feedback that Lakota's J76, a bull that I had sold to Preston Carlton as a calf, um, gave the best production. Well, that's an indication that maybe we want to use some of that semen and see what we get. Um, so in this case, again, I would wait till that point. I mean, it's also the same, and I'll probably get beat up for this, but again, we're going to be honest. I look at the South Pole breed, which is an incredibly popular breed, and I see a lot of good things. But when I see online, here's my 10-month-old bull, Magic Man, semen available. What? He doesn't even have calf on the ground yet. He doesn't, and even if he has calves on the ground, how can we collect a bull? How can we sell semen? Why would you buy semen? Right? I'm not being critical of the breed. I'm saying if I want to get into the South Pole, I don't want semen off your yearling. I want some 8, 9 year old bull that's produced lights out. And the same is true in the Devon breed. Um, why am I going to roll the dice on a question mark when there's proven bulls out there uh, that'll work? And there's enough of them. 25 years ago, the pool of selection was much less. But of course, we've imported a lot of genetics. The Gerald Fry and Rid Shin and the whole NATA group imported the whole Rotakawa herd over. There was a group of breeders, David Shoemaker, Bill Walker, John Farrell, that brought a bunch of genetics over from England. Jenny Carl out in Montana has brought a bunch of additional genetics in. I get calls from international people wanting me to buy their semen, and I go, I'm 15 years away from seeing what we got, from testing and having a real accurate reflection of the bulls that Vic Edwards and Arthur Beasley and sent over, and among others. Um, and how do they work? So, it's a slow process, but by sharing information, right? Like the breeders that all shared about J76, if we can have open conversations uh, about what this bull is producing. And that's one of the real benefits to my consultation work. I come do a consultation in your herd where you use semen off Lakota's King Henry. Well, how is it working in your herd?
Mhm.
Right. And so there's additional learning that comes from that. But um, back to what you said about starting with older cows, you know, I don't want embryos. I had a national champion female we went to Kearney, Nebraska for what was it called? The Grass Fed Exchange. Alan Williams judged, and my red heifer took first place. Well, I had 3 or 4 people. How about embryos? Sell me some embryos. Well, when she had her first calf, her front right teat was the size of my forearm. It was a mess. She was culled.
Mhm.
If I'd have collected embryos and sold them to you or somebody else, and then we got a bunch of heifers with, you know, winning the show is looking at a photograph, one moment in time. It doesn't tell us anything. And I'm not being critical of the judge. He couldn't tell that was coming. But
Mhm.
um, and that cow came from a good cow with a nice udder, but that gene's hiding in there. So um,
Yeah.
proven genetics is the way to go. And so if I was going to collect Bruce, I would probably do it in a very small way, um, just to have that genetics to go back to for yourself. But if we give Bruce another year or two and we can see some of these sons and daughters as they develop, then I'm interested in either buying semen from you or partnering in a bigger way on semen from that bull. Uh, hope that answers the
Yeah,
question.
that's great. So I wanted to show you this picture because this is Sir Lufton. And he came from the bull test. You recommended him as a potential herd sire for us. He was here for 4 years. I got him from Christian Ramsburg, um, and just a fantastic bull. Ended up with cancer at I think it was 8.5 years old, um, and lost all ability to have any kind of sensation in his back end. Stopped breeding and had to put him down. We tried to collect him. I wish I had. That's the I do have proven daughters and there's proven sons out of him all over the place that I like that come from the Cutcomb Jaunty line. If anyway, I just that's the miss in my story is the opportunity to collect him because by the time I tried, it was too late. So that's the tension, Jeremy. I'm just
No,
maybe.
you're right. There was a Noyle boy son, and my dad got a call 20 years ago from an extension agent in North Carolina. Can't remember the man's name, but a great cattleman. I never met him, but my dad just went on and on about this guy, and his resume reflected it. Well, he called my dad, said, "There's a bull up here, Effingham's T28, best bull I've ever seen of any breed." And so we bought the bull, and we brought him back, and we bred a bunch of cows to him. And probably my fault. I was young. I was driving by and I could see the bull laying out on the hill. Didn't pay any attention. I went back a couple hours later and he's laying there dead. Well, he had laid down with his feet uphill and couldn't get up. And it's a very rare thing that happens, but it happens to older animals. Well, fast forward 4 or 5 years, all the T28 daughters are just the best cows out there.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't have any information that would get me to collect him that quick, but I wish I had. And Sir Lufton, I agree, he should have been collected. Why didn't I collect him? Because he's out of Cutcomb Jaunty, and we have that semen. And on the dam side is a bloodline that I we have plenty of. So didn't see the need. But just as we've collected bulls that we ended up throwing away or not using, we've let a few ships
Miss.
sail that we
Hmm.
wished we would have collected.
Right.
Uh, and so there's factors that play into it. But we there's a bull called Crooked Tree, and I owned him, and I collected a bunch of semen, sent him to you. You collected a bunch of semen. I sell very little Crooked Tree semen.
Mhm.
Now I love Crooked Tree. He's a bull that should be used more. Definitely in the deep south. Um, the knock on Crooked Tree is from weaning to 14 months old, his calves are marginal. But like a racehorse that comes on that last turn, at the quarter pole and passes everybody. And it's a 2 year race, right? We're finishing beef in 2 years, and the Crooked Tree Sons at 2 years have caught up or surpassed the other animals. It's a low milk, heavy muscle bloodline from the deep south. Should be used more. But my point is, we don't move enough semen to make it worth storing hundreds and thousands of straws, and the breed's going to miss out. But if you and I go out of business, then there's no semen. So
That's
um,
true. Yep.
it's a tricky thing. And the other piece of it is people collect semen two ways. There's traveling semen collectors, and then there's certified semen centers that can only freeze it if they have 70% live rate, a certain number of abnorms, and the semen has to be of a certain quality. The traveling semen guys, some of them are fantastic, and it doesn't mean that the semen they collect isn't good, but several breeders have been burned where they had bulls collected, they sold semen. The people that use the semen had low conception rate, so they test the semen, come find out 40% alive, 30% alive, and now you're using two, three straws at a time. It's very inconvenient. It's not a good look for your business, and you've done nothing. You've just been a victim of not knowing what you were dealing with. So buyer beware a little bit. Um, also, are we talking quarter cc straws or half cc straws? Um, Obviously, you're getting twice the amount of semen. So things to keep in mind with it, but um, I think there's golden rules in cattle. If a cow doesn't have a calf, you cull it. Well, is that 100% all the time? You're a liar if you say it is, but it should be a rule of thumb. If a bull doesn't have 33 centimeter scrotal at 18 months, shouldn't be a bull anymore. If your yearlings aren't 650 pounds, you're not feeding your cattle well enough. Um, you know,
Man,
don't
there's so
flush
much
out
to dive into right there. That is like
the,
that's you're peering into a deep well of information and understanding. So
yeah, and it's the golden rule, but it's not 100%, but it's where you should start, right? If a cow didn't have a calf, she should be culled. Can you talk me out of it? Yeah, but you got some talking to do. You're gonna have to convince me. You're gonna have to give me multiple reasons why we're keeping her around. Uh, and if my dad ever gave me one great piece of advice, I'll change the language a little bit. But if it's crap now, it's gonna be crap in a year, and it's gonna be crap 10 years from now. And if you have a cow that didn't breed and you keep her in your herd, I'll bet you money within 3 years she comes open again. Um, so, uh,
All right, my last question.
you got it.
So you were making fun of the fact that I don't have the trophies in my background that you do here, right? But
That was before we started recording, to be fair,
oh
but
yeah, right.
you
You're like,
alert.
hey, there's we both have our trophies in the background, right?
Uh-huh.
Over your right shoulder is a picture of an older man with a younger child, and you clearly are in a legacy um, context. What are some of the things that you like legacy wise are most thankful for that you lay your head on the pillow and say, yeah, this was such a surprise, praise the Lord.
So many things. Certainly family first. Um, we've certainly had our bumps and challenges in our family, as every family has. But all my kids, that's my grandson Dylan over my shoulder and has to have a cowboy hat and a working stick just like grandpa.
That's
And
a
I love,
legit picture then.
uh,
That's awesome. Best
oh,
trophy on the rack.
it is, right? And all my kids were there and then they fell out of it. They love the farm and then they've had enough of it. And then they've all come back. Um, all my kids, I have a daughter who is a NICU nurse in Charlottesville, an hour away, and the rest of my children live within a half mile on neighboring properties or on the farm. My second oldest son moved to Miami, said adios. I'm allergic to every kind of pollen and grass there is out there. And I want to live the high life, the high style. And he still drives a Beamer, but now he lives on the farm and works remotely and does his thing. But they thought they wanted to get away from the farm, and then they had an appreciation for it, and that's fantastic. And the other piece I would say, last year we got Conservationist of the Year in the county, and for a number of reasons. Well, I had no intention on putting beavers back in the river and quail on the river bottom and dung beetles and uh, all these things in the natural ecosystem that have flourished from just working with nature and God instead of working against it.
Hmm.
And, you know, I'm not against Roundup because I want to be organic. I'm against Roundup because it's poison.
Hmm.
And we farmed for how many centuries with no glycophosphate? Why do we need glycophosphate?
Hmm.
And my neighbors, uh, sort of are my enemies. My neighbors feed poison to the birds so they don't poop in the dairy feed and raise the somatic cell count in the milk. We've got a birdhouse on every other fence post uh, because we don't use insecticides. We let nature take care of it. Um, and so I don't know that I really deserve that award. It's just compounding and cascading effects from working with nature. But in hindsight, it makes me very proud because the legacy I want to leave is that, we don't own this farm. We're just stewards of the land for a piece of time. And can we leave it in better shape than we found it? And going from 2% organic matter to 10% and things like that, uh, I don't mind bragging about. Um,
That's awesome. Thank you.
so yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for this first podcast. This has been fantastic and has lived up to my dreams. I think we've shared what we wanted to share. Um, I did forget. We agreed you were going to do our prayer before each one of these things, and we forgot that. But maybe I can turn it over to you now to do a closing prayer and maybe some blessings on us that we do a good job, tell a good story here going forward.
I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm glad you brought that up. So thank you. Yeah, I'll pray. Close us for sure. Father, thank you for the gift of friendship and the gift of stewardship, the opportunities to be found in both of those places. Thank you for our stories and the way you woven together our lives individually and then corporately. Thank you for Jeremy and his friendship specifically, and the pace that he sets for us as a leader, the bar that he sets for us as a farmer, as a steward, and the way he honors and appreciates the people around him. And I just thank you for all of it. Thank you for the space of called the Devon Corner and the chance to tell stories and to be drawn into what you've done here in this breed of cattle that we've come to love called Devons. We just praise you because you, as the designer, know how animals function and function well, and we get to see glimpses of that sometimes in mass. Thank you for all the things that were set to engage here through this podcast and all the people that we're will encounter, and just the different ways that stewards around the country and around the world see and understand what you've done here through these animals. And we just ask that you would continue to facilitate our eyes and our understanding, that we would grow in knowledge and wisdom and be found full of delight because of the goodness of because of your goodness and what you provide. Thank you again for this time today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Good stuff.
Good stuff. Well, that's it for the Devon Corner for this episode number 1. Hopefully, we'll be doing episode 100 here in a few years. We're going to aim for one a month, and join us next time with AJ O'Neill, where we talk specifically about Devon beef, the butcher's breed, the best breed there is. Thanks a lot.